So in this segment, we're going to be talking about how Brexit is costing the Scotch whisky industry £5 million a week, and obviously that's a lot of money. Scotch is a big industry in Scotland. It's exported around the world. It's very popular in the States, the US of A, and it's popular in the EU as well. And their exports have been hit dramatically. At least, well, I suppose you'd say Britain's GBs, Great Britain's exports have been impacted dramatically thanks to Brexit and all the checks that happen. Scotch is made from vegetables and whatever. I don't know the process for it, but there are export checks for it, and that's cost the industry a lot of money and a lot of time. Scotland's ruling party, the SNP, have recently claimed that the trade complications created by Brexit are costing the Scotch whisky industry £5 million a week. The SNP used sales figures comparing from last January-May to the same period in 2019, revealing that exports were lower by 105.7 million. Lending strength to the argument is that EU sales figures following the end of the Brexit transition period dropped 135.9 million compared to the same period in 2019. Now, it's a bit strange they're using the figures from 2019. I do have a slight issue with that. But I suppose, don't know what they argue. I suppose, the pandemic didn't really hit until March of last year, so maybe they've done it just because the numbers were higher. It's very odd. But, the government have called the figures slightly misleading, saying it's hard to draw conclusions in the wake of the effects of the pandemic and rising exports compared to 2020. Again, the Conservative government are trying to spin it one way, and the SNP are trying to spin it another way. But I think if we wait a bit longer, say next year, we'll have a better picture of the numbers. Walking the tightrope between the two views, the Scottish Whisky Association, which represents the industry, says in an official statement it pointed out the rising levels of exports since 2020 nadir, while also making clear that doing business with the EU has become more complicated thanks to the changes in trade that Brexit has created. So the point being is that it has added a cost, and if you're in the EU, if you're a customer who likes Scotch, you might still buy it and you might still pay however much it's gone up by, depending on the value of the product. But chances are, if it's gone up by a bit more than you're willing to pay, you're not going to buy it, and that's really going to impact the sales. The Scotch whisky is exported to the European Union has changed since Brexit. The producers have had to adapt to custom systems, labelling and paperwork, as well as the withdrawal of some transport services, because let's not forget here, they're going to be impacted by the HGV crisis as well. So not only has the customs declarations and all this new paperwork have to be filled out, but it's going to be more expensive for them to just transport it from Scotland to, say, France via using England as a land bridge. So it is costing them a lot of money. It's hard to figure out the total amount. It could be the S&P are over-egging it a bit by using sort of 2019's figures, but at the same time, we know that they've had a massive hit to their industry thanks to Brexit. And yes, they might be able to export more to Australia, but Australia's way further away. It's a way harder market to get into. The level of exports fluctuate month by month. That's why you look at trends. And this has been impacted by the Rona as well as by the UK's departure from the EU. While it's undoubtedly a tough start to the year for companies, the drop in exports in the first quarter is partially explained by the increased exports in 2020. So that would be down to stockpiling. In December, there would have been potentially a lot of EU companies kind of stockpiling Scotch, because they didn't know what the rules were going to be like properly. Well, I suppose they did know what the rules were going to be. We agreed the deal at the end of the year, didn't we? So it makes sense they would do this just in case there were tariffs. So that's why you wouldn't use December as a year, or sort of November and December as a year when you talk about the trend in numbers because of that. So maybe using the 2019 figures actually does make more sense, considering all the stockpiling and things that would have happened. The cost of doing business is certainly higher for Scotch whisky companies because of Brexit, and to some extent favour larger companies that can absorb the costs. While smaller producers lose out, bigger companies can pay to have stock stored in the EU. They can pay more for hauliers. They could be the ones, monopolising the amount of the lack of lorry drivers we have. If, for example, you're a lorry driver who's asked to go to, say, some of the smaller companies and they pay you a certain amount, but then one bigger company offers you a lot more to do maybe less runs, you're going to go to the bigger company because they've offered you more money for less work, and that's going to put the smaller businesses out because there's a huge shortage of lorry drivers. For example, the price of materials that come from the EU used in Scotch has risen. The SNP Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade, Drew Henry, claimed in June the price of cardboard and glass used by the industry is up 12% and 7% respectively. That could be down to the fact that there's a shortage of glass and cardboard. Cardboard is one I know because a lot of people have just kept it in their houses rather than putting in recycling, so that's a huge problem. With glass I'm unsure about, but that could be down in part to production issues, and obviously they've still got to get this stuff, the cardboard and the glass, transported up to where they are. So obviously with the haulier shortage, that's going to push up prices as well. So it makes sense that these things have gone up in price. Many UK retailers were also not shipping to the EU at the end of the transition period. That's down to the complexities of Brexit. The world's largest online retailer, the Whisky Exchange, has recently started shipping to the EU again after many months of not being able to do so, while another online vendor, Master of Malt, is not delivering to the EU, and that's because of the cost of the paperwork. They've lost an entire export market. You're talking hundreds of millions of potential customers. The UK, the Scottish whisky industry is lost out on because the complexities around Brexit are still there. You still need rules of origins, you still need potentially health certificates of certain plants maybe. You still need things to be checked on. You're still going to pay over the odds to get a haulier. You're still paying a lot of money to get the supplies to yourself. And once we start doing import checks, the costs go up even more. So it might be the EU, the sort of S&P fiddling the figures here a bit, just using a bit of trickery. It might not be £5 million a week. It could be, say, £3 million. That's still a lot of money to any industry. A lot of money. So the S&P might be over-egging the numbers a bit, but even if it's 2 or 3 million, that's a huge loss, especially since I would wager that domestic sales have gone down because people have less money. You can't afford luxuries now as much as you could do pre-pandemic. At the end of the article, they say, however, as the EU is one of the Scotch whisky industry's key markets, Brexit uncertainties are unlikely to go away anytime soon. This is a key market for the industry. The EU, there's a lot of people there, obviously a lot of whiskey drinkers. And even if they do open up these new emerging markets or whatever, how many people in these countries can afford to buy Scotch, a premium whiskey? How many people in, say, India or any of the BRICS countries, South Africa, Brazil? You're talking about a lot in terms of transport and also a huge cost of the drink itself. How many people in these emerging markets can actually afford that? Not many, especially since some of these countries have very high tariffs on whiskey as well. India notoriously has high tariffs on whiskey imports. I think it's around 60 or 70%. So you're talking about 60% of the product on top of the actual price of the product is going to be added as a tariff, and the increased export cost of delivering a product from, say, Scotland to India. So maybe this number is slightly wrong, maybe it's 3 million, but it's a lot of money, and so much for those sunlit uplands. And this is just one more reason, I think, for Scotland to leave the Union and join the EU, because it might be the case that the UK actually never gets their act together. We never actually do proper import checks of stuff coming from the EU. So if Scotland did somehow manage to join the EU within the next few years, I don't know if that would be possible, or at least the single market and customs union, they would be able to export products to the UK no problem, because if we can't do import checks from France, we're definitely not going to do it for Scotland. So Scotland might have to do import checks from goods going from England to Scotland, but they might not do. There might not be export checks for goods going from Scotland to England. It might not happen. So they'll have free access to us, but we won't have free access to them as we do now, which would just be really comical, wouldn't it? But yeah. Anyways, to wrap this up, the Scotch industry is taking a massive hit thanks to Brexit. And do you know what? Some people might stop buying Scotch. They might start buying more Irish whiskey from the Jamesons or the Proper 12 or whatever other Irish whiskey brands there are. instead of buying Scotch, because eventually Scotch will just be priced out of the market and people's taste will change. When they can't get access to the ones they want, they might buy other products and they might not like them as much, but they'll get used to it and they'll buy those brands because it's what they're used to now and it's what's available. So anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.